Very much for joining us tonight. I think we all saw you, by the way, on the House floor today with your new baby. There we are. What's the baby's name?
Cricket, and I wanted her to see Nancy Pelosi sworn in as woman. So, is it the first woman speaker sworn in again? So for my daughter to see that, it was very, very special.
Let's hope she sees many more. I want to get your reaction today to the speaker's comments about impeachment, which sounds like a change of tone from what she was saying during the campaign.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump is either going to be impeached by the Congress or impeached at the ballot box. It's really a race as to which one will happen first. I think for the sake of democracy, just as Speaker Pelosi said, I'd rather see it done at the ballot box, but we're not going to shirk our responsibility and give him the presidential immunity he's enjoyed. Lawrence, also, if this was Donald Trump justice, Donald Trump would already be impeached by now because he makes wild accusations, rushes to judgment, doesn't rely on any evidence. That's not what's going to happen. We're going to look at the Mueller report. We're going to look at the emoluments clause. We're going to look at these other abuses of power. And if there is evidence, we're going to follow it. We're going to, run it down, put together an airtight case, and seek bipartisan buy-in.
And Congressman, what do you believe are should be the central focuses of investigations of the president and his administration that you in the House are now empowered to carry out?
I would say first how they impact everyday Americans. So, what he's done at the Department of Justice to not enforce the requirement that, you can't be charged more for a pre-existing condition by an insurance company. That affects Americans, but also the rule of law. We all have to follow the law. No one is above it, and that certainly applies to the president. So making sure that he, too, is not above it in the way that he has fired his investigator or the way he's tried to pick his judges, the way that he's tried to, get rid of his attorney general or put in place an attorney general that would try and end the Mueller investigation. So I think it's really explaining to the American people that investigations matter, whether it's upholding the Constitution, the rule of law, or issues that affect them at their kitchen table.
Congressman Neal, who's going to be the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, apparently intends to introduce a bill that will require presidential candidates to release 10 years of tax returns. And Ron Wyden in the Senate wants to introduce a companion bill requiring presidential candidates to release 10 years of tax returns. You might be a presidential candidate. You've talked about exploring that. Is that something you would support, releasing 10 years of tax returns?
It is something I would support, Lawrence, and for me, it would mean just going back to my TurboTax releases for most of the time I've been in Congress until I got married and my wife said, I think it's time that we get an accountant. But I do think that the American people should see any candidate's taxes. I think you need to know if a candidate for president has conflicts of interest and if those interests are contradictory to American values. And so transparency, I think, should win out here.
Now, obviously, that's a bill that would affect all Democratic candidates. It's interesting to note, by the way, that Chairman Neal is from Massachusetts, and his senior Senator Elizabeth Warren, who is running for president, has already released 10 years of tax returns. But when I think people hear that, they think about it as being aimed at Donald Trump, who has not released any tax returns. And do you think there could be Republican support for that bill, or will they try to protect the president from having to release tax returns?
Lawrence, I'm afraid that most of them overwhelmingly will seek to protect the president, and that's disappointing. But they have gone out of their way to take out the shovels, bury all of the evidence that we've seen in many of these investigations to protect the president. And I expect that even if it was in the interest of the country, and even if it meant that multiple billionaire Democratic candidates for president would have to disclose their taxes, I think Republicans will do anything right now to shield Donald Trump from lawful investigations.
Let me just get a quick word from you about the 7 Republicans who defected from the Republican position on the House floor tonight in voting to reopen the government. Is that the beginning of what could be more defections in the House?
It was the right thing to do, Lawrence. It was a bipartisan vote, and it was actually a vote that had already passed 100-0 with Republican and Democratic support in the Senate. And I expect there's going to be more votes like that. And most Americans at home ask me all the time in my district, why isn't there a vote in Congress on the DREAM Act, on background checks, on infrastructure, when there's consensus among the American people? And that's because for the last 8 years, Republicans have just prevented those votes from coming forward. And so now Republican members will get an opportunity to vote on issues like this. And I think you'll see more bipartisanship in this new 116th Congress.
Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you for joining us on this important night. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.